Have you ever been insulted so badly that it actually ruined your life? Sarah thought she hit rock bottom when a billionaire, disguised as a homeless man, left her a single, dirty dollar as a tip after she served him for 2 hours. But she didn't scream. She didn't throw it away. What Sarah did next defied every rule of human nature. She ran after him, not to fight, but to save him. And that one decision sparked a chain reaction of betrayal, a missing will, and a $50 million secret that would force the entire city to its knees. You think you know how this ends? You have no idea. The rain in Seattle doesn't wash things clean. It just makes the grime slicker. That's how Sarah Bennett felt as she stared out the grease-smeared window of Miller's Diner on 4th Avenue. It was 11:45 p.m. on a Tuesday. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and stale bacon grease, a scent that had woven itself into Sarah's hair and skin over the last 5 years. Sarah was 26, but her eyes held the exhaustion of someone twice her age. In her apron pocket, her phone vibrated. She didn't need to look to know who it was. It was the terrifying notification from First National Bank: insufficient funds. Her daughter Chloe was turning 6 tomorrow. There was no cake. There was no present. There was only an eviction notice taped to the door of their basement apartment in Fremont, threatening action within 72 hours if the arrears of $200 weren't paid. Table 4 needs a refill, Sarah. Stop daydreaming or clock out for good, barked Beatrice, the night manager. Beatrice was a woman who wore too much blue eyeshadow and wielded her limited power like a medieval mace. "On it, Bea," Sarah whispered, wiping her hands on her apron. Table 4 was occupied by a man who looked like he had been chewed up by the city and spat out. He had been sitting there for 2 hours. He wore a tweed coat that was fraying at the elbows and a newsboy cap pulled low over his eyes. He hadn't ordered a meal, just a cup of hot water with a slice of lemon. Other waitresses had ignored him. "He's a vagrant," one of them, a girl named Jessica, had sneered. "He's just here for the heat. Don't waste your time, Sarah. He won't tip." But Sarah knew what it was like to be cold. She had approached him with a fresh pot of coffee. "It's on the house, sir," she had said softly, pouring him a steaming mug. "And I had the cook throw on a couple of pancakes. Mistake order. Otherwise it goes in the trash." It wasn't a mistake order. Sarah had paid for the pancakes out of her own tips she desperately needed for Chloe's birthday. The old man had looked up then. His eyes were a piercing, icy blue, startlingly clear amidst the wrinkles of his face. "You don't have enough money to be feeding strays, girl," he grunted, his voice like gravel. "Everyone needs to eat," Sarah replied with a tired smile. Now, hours later, the man was leaving. He stood up, his joints popping, and shuffled toward the door. Sarah watched him go, feeling a pang of worry. The storm outside was intensifying. She walked to the table to clear the mug. Under the empty coffee cup sat a single, crumpled bill. Sarah's heart sank. She unfolded it. It was $1, a single George Washington. Jessica walked by and laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "Told you, $1. That's not a tip, that's an insult. You paid $6 for his pancakes, and he gave you $1. You're a sucker, Bennett." Sarah felt the heat rise in her cheeks. It wasn't the money. She hadn't expected a fortune. It was the principle. It was the fact that she had sacrificed her daughter's birthday money to feed him, and he had left the equivalent of a slap in the face. The exhaustion, the eviction notice, the fear, it all boiled over. She grabbed the dollar bill and her coat. "Where are you going?" Beatrice shouted from the counter. "If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back." "I'll be 2 minutes," Sarah yelled back, pushing through the heavy glass doors into the pouring rain. She spotted him half a block away, hunching against the wind near the intersection of Pine Street. "Hey!" Sarah screamed, sprinting through the puddles, her sneakers soaking through instantly. "Hey, wait!" The old man stopped and turned slowly. The rain dripped from the brim of his cap. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You forgot something?" Sarah stood there, panting, the rain plastering her hair to her face. She held out the crumpled dollar bill. Her hand was shaking, not from the cold, but from a mix of rage and sorrow. "You left this," Sarah said, her voice trembling. The man looked at the dollar, then at her. "It's a tip. For the service." "I don't want it," Sarah said, shoving it toward his chest. "Is it not enough?" the man asked, his eyes narrowing. "It's not about that," Sarah choked out, tears finally mixing with the rain. "I paid for your food because I thought you needed it. I didn't do it for a reward. But this feels like you're laughing at me. If you're down on your luck, keep your dollar. You need it more than I do. Buy a bus ticket. Buy a coffee tomorrow. Just don't treat people like they're worth nothing." She grabbed his callous hand and forced the wet bill into his palm. "Happy birthday to me," she whispered to herself, turning around to walk back to the diner, fully expecting to be fired. "Wait!" The man's voice cut through the sound of the traffic. It was different now. Stronger. Authoritative. Sarah stopped. "Turn around, Sarah Bennett," the man commanded. She froze. She hadn't told him her last name. She turned slowly. The hunched posture was gone. The old man was standing straight. He reached up and pulled off the soaking wet newsboy cap, revealing a shock of silver hair that was perfectly cut. He reached into his pocket, but instead of a weapon, he pulled out a sleek, black smartphone. "Sebastian," he spoke into the phone. "Bring the car around. We're done here." Sarah took a step back. "Who are you?" A black Rolls-Royce Phantom, which had been idling in the shadows of the alleyway, roared to life. Its headlights blinded Sarah for a moment as it pulled up to the curb next to them. A driver in a pristine suit jumped out with an umbrella, holding it over the old man. The old man looked at Sarah. "My name is Arthur Sterling." Sarah gasped. The name was legendary in Seattle. Arthur Sterling was the CEO of Sterling Heavy Industries. He owned half the skyline. He was worth billions. "Why?" Sarah whispered. "Why they act?" Arthur Sterling stepped toward her, ignoring the driver's umbrella. "Because everyone wants my money, Sarah. My children, my board members, my lawyers. I haven't had an honest interaction in 20 years. I wanted to see if there was anyone left in this city who would be kind to a man who had nothing to offer." He held up the wet $1 bill. "You failed the test of greed, but you passed the test of character." Sarah was shivering violently now. "I have to go back to work. I'm going to lose my job." "You don't have a job at Miller's Diner anymore," Arthur said calmly. "What?" Panic flared in her chest. "I bought the building 10 minutes ago from my phone while eating those dry pancakes," Arthur said, as casually as discussing the weather. "I'm firing Beatrice. She's incompetent and rude." Sarah stared at him, unable to process the words. "Get in the car, Sarah," Arthur said, gesturing to the open door of the Rolls-Royce. "I have a business proposition for you. It pays considerably more than pancakes." I can't. My daughter. We will pick up Chloe on the way. I believe she likes pepperoni pizza. And perhaps a specific doll from the American Girl store?" Sarah's knees went weak. "How do you know that?" "I know everything, Sarah. Now get in. Your life changed the moment you gave me this dollar back. But be warned." Arthur's face darkened, the shadow returning to his eyes. "The world I'm about to bring you into is dangerous. My family, They aren't like you. They are sharks, and I need someone to help me keep them from eating me alive." Sarah looked back at the diner. She looked at the warm, leather interior of the car. She thought of the eviction notice. She stepped into the car. The ride to the Sterling estate in the Highlands was silent. Sarah sat on the plush leather, clutching her phone. She had texted her neighbour, Mrs. Gable, to say she'd be late picking up Chloe, but Arthur had insisted they pick her up. Chloe was now asleep in the seat beside Sarah, clutching a brand-new doll that Arthur had, impossibly, had Sebastian produce from the trunk. The car turned through massive iron gates, winding up a long driveway lined with ancient oak trees. The mansion at the top of the hill looked like something out of a Gothic novel: stone turrets, ivy-covered walls, and dark windows. "Listen to me carefully," Arthur said, breaking the silence as the car slowed. "I am dying, Sarah." Sarah turned to him, shocked. "Mr. Sterling, don't offer sympathy. I have pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. Nobody knows except my doctor and Sebastian." He gestured to the driver. "My son, Richard, and my daughter-in-law, Catherine, are waiting for me to die. They want control of the trust. If they get it, they will dismantle the company, sell off the assets, and fire thousands of workers to line their own pockets." "Why tell me this?" Sarah asked. "Because I need a witness," Arthur said, his voice hard. "And I need a caretaker who can't be bought. I'm going to hire you as my private personal assistant. You will live here. You will receive a salary of 10,000 soles a month." Sarah choked on air. 10,000, plus a signing bonus of $50,000 to clear your debts. "But," Arthur raised a finger, "you must sign a non-disclosure agreement, and you must deal with my family. They will hate you. They will try to fire you. They will try to frame you. You must not break." "Why me?" Sarah asked, looking at her sleeping daughter. "I'm just a waitress." "Because you gave the money back," Arthur said simply. "Loyalty is the only currency I don't have." The car stopped. Sebastian opened the door. The front doors of the mansion swung open. A man in his 40s, wearing a cashmere sweater and holding a tumbler of scotch, stood in the doorway. He had Arthur's jawline, but none of his grit. This was Richard Sterling. Beside him was a woman with ice-blonde hair and a dress that cost more than Sarah's entire life earnings. Catherine. "Father," Richard drawled, his eyes scanning the Rolls-Royce. "You're late. We were discussing the merger with the board." He stopped when he saw Sarah step out in her wet diner uniform, carrying a sleeping child. Richard's lip curled in disgust. "Who is this? Did you pick up a stray dog?" "Richard, Catherine," Arthur said, stepping out and leaning heavily on his cane. "Meet Sarah Bennett, my new executive assistant and live-in caretaker." Catherine laughed, a brittle sound like breaking glass. "Don't be senile, Arthur. She's wearing a polyester apron. She smells like grease." "She smells like hard work," Arthur snapped, "something neither of you would recognize." "We have staff for this," Richard said, stepping forward, his face reddening. "We have nurses. We have Harvard graduates handling your schedule. You can't bring a waitress into this house. It's a security risk." "It's my house," Arthur roared, his voice echoing off the stone facade. "And it's my money. Sarah stays in the East Wing guest suite. Prepare the rooms." Richard glared at Sarah. His eyes were cold, calculating. He wasn't looking at her like a person. He was looking at her like a bug he needed to crush. "Hi," Sarah managed to say, holding Chloe tighter. Richard took a sip of his scotch, his eyes never leaving hers. "Enjoy your stay, Miss Bennett," he said softly, so only she could hear. "It won't be a long one." Arthur led Sarah inside. The foyer was breathtaking. marble floors, crystal chandeliers, art that belonged in museums, but the air was cold. "Go to your room," Arthur told her quietly. "Lock the door. Sebastian will bring you dinner. Tomorrow, the war begins." Sarah was led to a suite that was bigger than her entire apartment. A 4-poster bed, a bathroom with a jacuzzi tub, and a view of the Seattle skyline. She laid Chloe down on the bed. She went to the bathroom and stared at herself in the mirror. The diner uniform looked ridiculous here. She took the check Arthur had given her, the $50,000 advance, and looked at it. It was real, but as she undressed to shower, she noticed something in her apron pocket. It was the crumpled $1 bill. She must have pocketed it automatically when Arthur offered her the job. She smoothed it out on the marble vanity. That's when she saw it. In the bright bathroom light, she noticed writing on the back of the dollar bill. It wasn't written in pen. It was stamped in red ink, tiny, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. It was a series of numbers, 44 to 1902, and below that, a single word, Prometheus. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold rain. Arthur had said the dollar was a test of character. But what if it was something else? What if the dollar wasn't just a prop? She wrapped a towel around herself and walked back into the bedroom to check on Chloe. A piece of paper had been slid under her door. Sarah picked it up. It was typed on heavy, cream-colored stationery. "Leave tonight. Take the money and run. If you stay, he will drag you down with him. You have no idea what Prometheus really is." There was no signature. Sarah looked at the locked door. She looked at the check. She looked at her daughter, sleeping peacefully in a warm bed for the first time in her life. She picked up her phone and took a picture of the dollar bill. Then she took a picture of the note. "I'm not running," she whispered. The first morning at the Sterling estate broke with a deceptively serene silence. The sunlight filtered through heavy velvet drapes, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air of the guest suite. Sarah woke up with a start, her heart pounding, momentarily forgetting she wasn't in her damp basement apartment. She looked over to see Chloe still fast asleep, buried under a mound of goose-down comforters, the expensive doll clutched in her hand. For a split second, Sarah felt relief. Then, the memory of the note slid under the door came rushing back. "If you stay, he will drag you down with him." She got out of bed and dressed quickly. She didn't have her waitress uniform anymore, but she didn't have rich people clothes either. She put on her best pair of jeans and a clean white blouse she usually saved for parent-teacher conferences. When she opened the door, Sebastian was standing there like a statue. He was a mountain of a man, an ex-Marine who spoke little but saw everything. "Mr. Sterling requests your presence in the solarium for breakfast," Sebastian rumbled, "and he requested I give you this." He handed her a sleek black box. Inside was a phone, top of the line, encrypted, and a key card. "Access to the East Wing and the library. Do not lose it. Richard will not give you another." Sarah nodded, her throat dry. "Sebastian, who put the note under my door last night?" Sebastian's eyes flickered, just for a fraction of a second. "This house has many drafts, Miss Bennet. Papers fly around all the time. I would suggest you focus on your job, not on ghosts." He knew, but he wasn't talking. Sarah walked through the mansion, feeling small against the towering marble columns and oil paintings of dead ancestors who seemed to glare at her. She found the solarium, a glass-walled room filled with exotic orchids. Arthur sat at a round iron table, looking frailer than he had the night before. His skin was grey, parchment thin. Across from him sat Richard and Catherine. They were eating grapefruit with silver spoons, looking like predators dissecting a carcass. "Ah, the help has arrived," Catherine said without looking up. "I hope you slept well. The mattress in that suite is worth more than your education." "Catherine, enough," Arthur wheezed. He motioned for Sarah to sit next to him. "Sarah, today we begin work. I need you to organize the archives in my private study. It hasn't been touched in a decade. There are financial records there from the 90s that I need to review." Richard dropped his spoon. It clattered loudly against the china. "The archives? Father, those are sensitive company documents. You can't let a stranger rummage through them. That's a violation of board protocol." "I am the board," Arthur snapped, coughing violently into a napkin. When he pulled it away, Sarah saw a speck of blood. "And I trust her more than I trust the auditors you hired, Richard." Richard's eyes narrowed. He stood up, wiping his mouth. "You're making a mistake. A very expensive mistake." He looked at Sarah. "If you leak one piece of paper to the press, Miss Bennet, I will sue you until your grandchildren are born in debt." He stormed out, Catherine trailing behind him, casting one last look of venom at Sarah. "Don't mind them," Arthur said, his voice trembling. "They are scared." "Scared of what?" Sarah asked, pouring him a fresh cup of tea. "Of the truth," Arthur said. "Sarah, the dollar bill. Do you still have it?" "Yes. It's in my pocket. Keep it safe. The number's on the back. 44, 902. Do you know what they mean?" "No," Sarah said. "Good. It's safer that way. But if anything happens to me, if I die suddenly, or if I am incapacitated, you must take that dollar to the location those numbers represent. Promise me." "I promise. But Arthur, you're scaring me." "Who is Prometheus?" Arthur gripped her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "Prometheus isn't a who, it's a what. It's the project that Richard has been hiding from me. It's the reason the company is bleeding money, and it's the reason I'm dying." Sarah froze. You think they're killing you?" "I think," Arthur whispered, leaning in close, "that my cancer is real. But I think they are ensuring I don't survive it long enough to change my will." The rest of the day was a blur of dust and paper. Sarah spent 8 hours in the library, sorting through boxes of old files. It was tedious work, but her mind was racing. She was looking for anything related to Prometheus. Around 4 p.m., the door to the library creaked open. It wasn't Arthur, it was Richard. He walked in, closing the heavy oak door behind him and locking it. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home echoed in the large room. Sarah stood up, clutching a file folder to her chest. "Mr. Sterling, can I help you?" Richard smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He walked over to the desk she was using and sat on the edge of it, invading her personal space. "You're a hard-working girl, Sarah. I respect that. You're a mother, right? Chloe? Cute kid." "Leave my daughter out of this," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "I'm just making conversation," Richard said, examining his manicured fingernails. "Look, let's cut the charade. My father is senile. He picks up strays to make himself feel better about being a ruthless capitalist for 50 years. He's using you." "He gave me a job. That's more than you've done," Sarah shot back. Richard chuckled. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He scribbled something quickly and tore off the check. He slid it across the desk. Sarah looked down. It was made out to cash. The amount was $500,000. $500,000, Richard said softly. "Tax-free, if you know how to handle it. Take the check. Pack your bags. Take the kid and go to, I don't know, Hawaii? Start a new life. Open a bakery." Sarah stared at the check. It was more money than she could imagine. It was freedom. It was safety. "And what do I have to do?" Sarah asked. Just leave, tonight, and leave the dollar bill he gave you, that silly little keepsake. Sarah looked up at him. The dollar bill? Why do you care about a $1 bill? Richard's face twitched. Sentimental value. It was the first dollar he ever earned. He told you that story, right? It belongs to the family. He was lying. Sarah could see it in the way a vein in his forehead pulsed. He didn't care about sentiment. He was terrified of the code. Sarah picked up the check. She looked at the zeros. Then she slowly tore it in half, and then in half again. "Get out," Sarah said. Richard's face turned a shade of purple she didn't know existed. He stood up, towering over her. "You stupid, ignorant waitress. You think you're the hero of this story? You're the casualty. When I'm done with you, you'll wish you had taken that money." He unlocked the door and slammed it behind him so hard a painting on the wall rattled. Sarah sank into the chair, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was shaking. She had just declared war on a man with infinite resources. She pulled the dollar bill out of her pocket. 44 to 1902. She opened her laptop and typed the numbers into a search engine. Nothing. She tried them as coordinates. It pointed to a spot in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. She tried them as a date. April 19th, 2002. She searched the archives for that date. She found a single folder labeled Acquisitions, Biotech. Inside was a document detailing the purchase of a small pharmaceutical company called Ethelgard. The CEO of that company was a man named Dr. Victor Vance, and printed on the letterhead of the acquisition form was a logo, a hand holding a torch, Prometheus. 2 weeks passed. The atmosphere in the mansion had shifted from cold to toxic. The servant stopped making eye contact with Sarah. Her meals were left outside her door on trays, often cold. Sebastian was the only one who spoke to her, and even he was becoming more guarded. Arthur's health was deteriorating at a terrifying speed. He was bedridden now, his skin yellowing, his periods of lucidity becoming shorter. It was a Tuesday night, raining again. Just like the night they met, Sarah was sitting by Arthur's bedside, reading to him from a book of poetry. "Sarah," Arthur rasped, his eyes closed. "The water. It tastes bitter." Sarah looked at the glass of water on the nightstand. Richard had brought it in earlier, playing the role of the concerned son. "Let me get you fresh water," Sarah said. She took the glass, but instead of dumping it, she poured a small sample into an empty pill bottle she had in her pocket. "The will," Arthur whispered, grabbing her hand. I changed it. Yesterday. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson." "Rest, Arthur," Sarah said soothingly. "No, listen." Arthur's eyes flew open, wild and desperate. "I cut them out. Richard and Catherine. They get nothing. I left the voting rights to the trust. To you." Sarah dropped the book. "What?" "Arthur, you can't. I can't run a multi-billion-dollar company. They will kill me." "You won't run it. You will hold it," Arthur wheezed, "until the corruption is purged. You are the trustee. You have the power to fire the board. You have the power to stop Prometheus." "Does Richard know?" Sarah asked, panic rising in her throat. "He suspects. That's why I'm afraid tonight." Arthur's voice trailed off. He fell into a fitful sleep. Sarah sat there, terrified. She was now the target of a billion-dollar vendetta. She needed to get the water tested. She needed to find out what Prometheus was doing. She left the room quietly. She needed to get to the kitchen to get fresh water. But as she passed the library, she heard voices. She has to go. Tonight. It was Catherine's voice. "I can't just throw her out. The old man will call the police," Richard hissed. "Not if she's a criminal," Catherine said. "Is it done?" "Yes, it's in her bag. The emerald necklace, the one my mother wore. Sarah gasped, clamping her hand over her mouth. They were framing her. She turned to run back to her room, to grab Chloe and flee. But as she turned the corner, she ran smack into a wall of blue uniform. It was a police officer, 2 of them, and behind them, Richard, looking somber. "That's her," Richard said, pointing a shaking finger. "That's the woman who has been stealing from us." "Mum, step back," the officer said, his hand on his holster. "I didn't steal anything," Sarah screamed. "They're lying. Check the water. They're poisoning his father." "She's hysterical," Catherine sighed, stepping out from the shadows. "She's been acting erratic lately. Drug use, we suspect. And then tonight, my emerald necklace went missing." "Check her bag," Richard commanded. The officer grabbed Sarah's oversized tote bag, which she left on the hall table. He upended it. Out tumbled her wallet, keys, a spare diaper for Chloe, and a dazzling necklace of emeralds and diamonds. Sarah stared at it. "I've never seen that before. They put it there." "You're under arrest for grand larceny," the officer said, grabbing Sarah's wrists and spinning her around. The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked shut. "My daughter!" Sarah screamed, struggling. "My daughter is upstairs. You can't leave her with them." "We'll call Child Protective Services," Richard said smoothly. "She'll be taken care of. Better than you can anyway." "No, no!" Sarah thrashed, kicking out. "Sebastian, Sebastian, help me." Sebastian appeared at the top of the stairs. He looked at Sarah, then at Richard. His face was unreadable. He did nothing. Sarah's heart shattered. He was on their payroll after all. "Take her away," Richard said, turning his back. As they dragged Sarah out of the mansion into the pouring rain, she saw the upstairs window. Arthur's room. The light flickered and went out. The holding cell at the Seattle 4th Precinct smelled of bleach and despair. Sarah sat on the metal bench, her knees pulled to her chest. It had been 12 hours. She had been processed, fingerprinted, and thrown in here. The bail was set at $250,000. It might as well have been $1 billion. She had used her one phone call to try and reach Mrs. Gable, her neighbor, to find out where Chloe was. No answer. She was alone. She had lost the job. She had lost her reputation. She was about to lose her child to the foster system. And Arthur was probably dead, or close to it, completely defenseless against his viper of a son. Sarah closed her eyes and cried until she had no tears left. "Bennett!" a guard shouted, banging on the bars. "Lawyer!" Sarah looked up. "I don't have a lawyer. I wanted a public defender." "Well, someone paid for a fancy one. Get up." The gate buzzed open. Sarah walked into the interrogation room. Sitting there was not a lawyer in a suit, but a woman with sharp glasses and a leather jacket. She looked like a hacker, not an attorney. "Who are you?" Sarah asked. "My name is Jinx," the woman said. "I work for a friend. Sit down." Sarah sat. "Who sent you? Arthur?" "Arthur is in a chemically induced coma," Jinx said bluntly. "Richard moved him to a private hospice facility this morning. No visitors allowed." Sarah slammed her fist on the table. "I knew it. They're killing him." "We know," Jinx said. "That's why I'm here. Bail has been posted." "By who?" "Anonymous." "Look, we don't have much time. Richard is moving fast. He's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning to declare Arthur incompetent and take full control of Sterling Industries. If he does that, he will liquidate the assets, including the Prometheus project, and vanish the evidence." "What is Prometheus?" Sarah asked. "I found a file about a company called Ethelgard." Jinx's eyes widened. "You found that?" "Good. That connects the dots. Ethelgard was developing a gene therapy drug. It was supposed to cure cancer, but it failed trials. It killed people. Richard didn't shut it down. He rebranded it as Prometheus and has been selling it on the black market in Eastern Europe. He's been using Sterling Heavy Industries shipping containers to smuggle it. Sarah felt sick. He's a drug dealer? He's a mass murderer, Jinx corrected. And Arthur found out. That's why Arthur is dying. So what do we do? Sarah asked. I'm a waitress with a criminal record now. You have the dollar bill, Jinx said. Sarah patted her pocket. It was gone. They took my personal effects when I was booked. I got them back, Jinx said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. Everything is there. The dollar, the phone, your keys. Sarah ripped open the envelope. The crumpled George Washington was there. 441902, Sarah recited. I checked the date. It led to the file. But Arthur said if he died, I had to take the dollar to the location. It's not a date, Jinx said. And it's not coordinates. It's a locker number, but not a train station. Where, then? Think, Sarah. Where did you meet him? Where did this all start? Miller's Diner, Sarah whispered. No, before that. The pancakes, the coffee, the location. Sarah thought back. Miller's Diner is on 4th Avenue, near the King Street Station. King Street Station, Jinx nodded. Old school. Arthur loves trains. He owns the railroad lines. 441902. Bank of Lockers 44, row 19, locker 02. And what's inside? The smoking gun, Jinx said. The original clinical trial data that Richard tried to destroy, and a video confession Arthur recorded when he was first diagnosed. We have to get it, Sarah said, standing up. Now. There's a problem, Jinx said grimly. Richard knows about the dollar. He saw the security footage of you handing it back to Arthur that night, and Arthur giving it back. He knows it's a key. He's got men watching the station. So we can't get in? I can't get in, Jinx said. I'm flagged. But you look like a waitress. You look like nobody. I look like a fugitive, Sarah said. Exactly. People look right through fugitives. They avoid eye contact. Jinx stood up. I have a motorcycle outside. We're going to King Street Station. You have to get that locker open. If you get the drive, we crash the board meeting tomorrow. We play the video. We save the company. We save Arthur. And my daughter? Chloe is with Mrs. Gable, Jinx said. Sebastian dropped her off before the police arrived. He's on our side, Sarah. He couldn't fight the cops, or they would have arrested him too. He needed to stay free to make the call to me. Relief washed over Sarah so hard she almost collapsed. Chloe was safe. Sebastian was an ally. Okay, Sarah said, a fire igniting in her chest. Let's go get that locker. The rain had stopped, but the fog had rolled in. Seattle was a ghost town at 3 Yahoo a.m. Jinx dropped Sarah off a block away from King Street Station. Keep your head down, Jinx said. I'll cause a distraction at the main entrance. Sarah pulled her hood up. She clutched the dollar bill in her hand. She slipped through the side entrance near the Amtrak tracks. The station was echoing and empty, except for a few janitors and 2 men in dark suits standing near the locker bay. Richard's goons. They were scanning everyone. Sarah hid behind a pillar. Locker 44 was right behind them. There was no way to get to it without being seen. Suddenly, the fire alarm blared. Beep! 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 Fire detected in the North Concourse, a robotic voice announced. Jinx. The 2 men looked at each other, confused. People started running toward the exits. The confusion was her cover. Sarah sprinted. She didn't walk. She ran straight for the lockers. The men turned. Hey, you! Sarah slid on the polished floor, crashing into the metal bank of lockers. She scanned the numbers. 44-902. There it was. A rusted metal door. She jammed the dollar bill into the slot? No, That didn't make sense. It wasn't a bill acceptor. She looked at the dollar again. The code. Is it a combination? The locker had an old-fashioned rotary dial. She spun it. Right to 44, left to 19, right to 02. Click! The door popped open. "Get her!" one of the men shouted, pulling a gun. Sarah reached inside. It wasn't a flash drive. It was a key, a heavy, old iron key, and a note. The vault beneath the diner. Sarah grabbed the key. A bullet pinged off the metal locker inches from her face. She scrambled up and ran, weaving through the panicked crowd. She burst out the side door into the alleyway where Jinx was waiting, the motorcycle engine revving. "Did you get it?" Jinx yelled over the alarm. "It's not a drive!" Sarah screamed, jumping on the back. "It's a key! To the diner!" "Miller's diner?" Jinx revved the bike. "Arthur, you cryptic old bastard!" As they peeled away, tires screeching, a black SUV swerved around the corner, pursuing them. "Hold on!" Jinx shouted. "This is going to get bumpy!" The motorcycle roared through the slick streets of downtown Seattle, weaving between honking taxis and confused pedestrians. Jinx drove with the precision of a surgeon and the recklessness of a stunt pilot. Behind them, the black SUV plowed through a red light, its engine screaming. "Hold on!" Jinx yelled, her voice barely audible over the wind. She banked hard to the left, shooting down a narrow alleyway near Pike Place Market. The SUV tried to follow, but it was too wide. It screeched, metal grinding against brick, and wedged itself between a dumpster and a fire escape. They didn't stop to watch. Jinx gunned the engine, speeding toward 4th Avenue. When they arrived at Miller's Diner, the building looked like a corpse. The windows were boarded up with plywood. The neon sign that used to buzz "Open 24 hours" was smashed. It was dark, silent, and imposing. "Round back!" Sarah shouted. "The bulkhead doors!" They skidded to a halt near the grease dumpsters. Sarah jumped off, her legs shaking from the adrenaline. She scrambled toward the rusted metal doors that led to the basement. It was where the deliveries came in, sacks of flour, crates of frozen fries. She jammed the heavy iron key she found in the locker into the padlock. It resisted, gritty with rust. "Come on!" She gritted out, twisting it with both hands. Snap. The lock broke. Jinx helped her heave the heavy doors open. A smell of rot and old oil wafted up. "Charming," Jinx muttered, pulling a flashlight from her jacket. "Ladies first." They descended into the darkness. The basement of Miller's Diner was a labyrinth of shelves and old equipment. Sarah knew this place. She had come down here 1,000 times to grab napkins or ketchup. Arthur's note said, "The vault," Sarah whispered. "There is no vault here. Just the walk-in freezer and the dry storage." "Look for anomalies," Jinx said, sweeping her beam across the dusty concrete. "Arthur bought this building 10 minutes after you met him. But he knew about the vault before. That means he didn't build it. He found it." Sarah closed her eyes, thinking. Arthur Sterling, the billionaire industrialist, and a greasy spoon diner. What was the connection? "The prohibition," Sarah said, her eyes snapping open. "Beatrice used to tell stories about how this place was a speakeasy in the 1920s. She said there were tunnels." Sarah ran to the back wall, behind the stacks of canned peaches. She pushed the shelving unit aside. The concrete wall looked solid. "Give me the $1, Jinx said. "Why?" "Just give it to me." Sarah handed her the crumpled bill. Jinx shone the UV light of her flashlight onto the wall. Nothing. Then she shone it on the $1. The red stamp on the back, 441902, glowed. And then Sarah saw it. On the concrete wall, faint scratches that looked like random graffiti. But under the UV light, they matched the pattern on the bill. "It's not a combination," Jinx said. "It's a map overlay." She pressed her hand against a specific brick that corresponded to the position of George Washington's eye on the bill. A low rumble shook the floor. The section of the wall groaned and swung inward. "Jackpot," Jinx whispered. They stepped inside. It wasn't a cave, it was a high-tech command center. Monitors lined the walls, currently dark, and in the center sat a solitary desk with a single computer server humming on backup power. He was spying on them, Sarah realized. He moved his operations here to be off the grid. On the desk sat a heavy, leather-bound ledger and a hard drive labeled Prometheus Final. Sarah grabbed the ledger. She opened it. It was a list of names, victims, hundreds of them, people who had died during the illegal drug trials of the Prometheus serum, and next to every name, a signature authorizing the cover-up. Richard Sterling. "We have it," Sarah said, tears stinging her eyes. "We have everything." "Touching," a voice echoed from the darkness behind them. Sarah spun around. Standing in the opening of the secret wall was Richard Sterling. He wasn't wearing his suit anymore. He was wearing a black trench coat, and in his hand was a suppressed pistol. Behind him stood two large men. "How?" Sarah stammered. "You think you're clever?" Richard stepped into the room, the gun leveled at Sarah's chest. "I put a tracker in the locker key, you idiot. I knew my father would leave a failsafe. I just needed someone stupid enough to fetch it for me." He held out his hand. "Give me the book." "No," Sarah said, clutching it to her chest. "I'll shoot the hacker first," Richard said, pointing the gun at Jinx. "Then I'll shoot you. And then, well, accidents happen in abandoned buildings. Gas leaks are so common." Jinx tensed, ready to spring, but the distance was too great. "Do it, Sarah," Jinx warned. "He's going to kill us anyway." "Smart girl," Richard sneered. "Now, the book." Sarah stepped forward, her hand trembling. She held out the ledger. Richard reached for it, a triumphant grin twisting his face. "You lose, Waitress. You were always just a—" Clang! A massive metal shovel smashed into the back of Richard's head. Richard crumpled to the floor, the gun skittering away. Standing behind him, emerging from the shadows of the basement, was a figure in a chef's uniform. "Nobody calls my waitress a loser," a gruff voice said. It was Cook, Old Man Miller, the former owner, who Sarah thought had moved to Florida. "Miller," Sarah gasped. "I thought you sold the place." "I did," Miller shouted, raising the shovel as the two bodyguards stepped forward. "But I still have the keys, and I forgot my lucky spatula. What is going on here?" The bodyguards lunged. "Jinx, now!" Sarah screamed. Jinx didn't need telling. She spin-kicked the first guard into the server rack. Sparks flew. Miller swung the shovel again, hitting the second guard in the kneecap with a sickening crunch. "Run!" Miller yelled. "I'll hold 'em off. Go!" "I can't leave you," Sarah cried. "Go, Sarah, for Chloe!" Miller roared, swinging the shovel like a medieval knight. Jinx grabbed Sarah's arm and dragged her toward the exit. They scrambled over Richard's unconscious body. Sarah grabbed the hard drive and the gun Richard had dropped. They burst out into the alleyway. "The board meeting starts in 20 minutes, Jinx panted, checking her watch. "It's 10 miles away." "We'll make it," Sarah said, her eyes hard. She looked at the gun in her hand, then threw it into the dumpster. "We don't need bullets. We have the truth." The conference room on the 50th floor of the Sterling Tower was silent. 20 board members sat around the mahogany table. At the head sat an empty chair, Arthur's. Standing at the podium was Catherine, Richard's wife. She looked impeccable and icy. "It is with a heavy heart," she began, feigning a tremor in her voice, "that we move to declare Arthur Sterling mentally incapacitated. His recent erratic behavior, hiring a waitress as an executive, giving away company assets, proves he is no longer fit to lead. Richard, who is currently dealing with a family emergency, has authorized me to finalize the vote." "Seconded," a grey-haired man said. All in favor of transferring full control to Richard Sterling? Catherine asked. Hands began to rise. 1, 5, 10. The double doors at the back of the room didn't just open, they exploded inward. Security guards tumbled into the room, pushed aside by a force of nature. Sarah Bennett strode in. Her jeans were covered in basement grime. Her face was smeared with grease. She looked like a wreck, but she held her head like a queen. "I object," Sarah said, her voice ringing clear and loud. "Security!" Catherine shrieked. "Get this filth out of here!" "Don't touch me," Sarah said to the guard reaching for her. She held up the hard drive. "If I leave, this goes to the New York Times, the FBI, and the Securities and Exchange Commission. Right now." The room froze. "What is that?" the grey-haired board member asked. "This," Sarah said, walking to the head of the table and placing the hard drive on Arthur's empty spot, "is Prometheus." Catherine went pale. "She's lying. She's a thief. She stole my jewelry." "I didn't steal your jewelry," Sarah said calmly, "but your husband stole thousands of lives." She plugged the drive into the presentation port. The massive screen behind Catherine flickered. A video appeared. It was Arthur Sterling. He was sitting in a hospital bed, looking weak but lucid. "Gentlemen of the board," the video, Arthur said, "if you are seeing this, it means I am either dead or silenced, and it means Sarah Bennett has succeeded where I failed." The room was deathly quiet. "My son, Richard, has been falsifying safety data for Project Prometheus. The drug is not a cure, it is a poison. He has been selling the failed batches overseas to recoup losses, resulting in over 400 deaths. The proof is in the files attached to this video." On the screen, documents began to scroll. Bank transfers, shipping manifests, death certificates. "Sarah Bennett is not just my assistant," Arthur continued. "She is the sole trustee of my voting shares. I signed the transfer 3 days ago, witnessed by my attorney and notarized. As of this moment, she controls 51% of Sterling Heavy Industries." Catherine slumped into a chair, burying her face in her hands. "Sarah," Arthur's image said, looking directly into the camera, "I told you I needed someone who wouldn't be bought. I'm sorry for the burden I've placed on you, but I know you'll do the right thing. You always return what isn't yours." The video ended. Sarah looked around the room. The board members were staring at her in shock. "Richard is currently unconscious in the basement of Miller's Diner," Sarah said. "The police are on their way to pick him up. I suggest you all decide which side of history you want to be on. The side that covers up mass murder for profit, or the side that fixes it?" The grey-haired man stood up. He looked at Catherine, then at Sarah. "I move to immediately suspend Richard and Catherine Sterling from all company positions pending a federal investigation," he said. "Seconded," another voice said. "All in favor?" Every hand went up. 6 months later, the rain had finally stopped in Seattle, replaced by a crisp, golden autumn. Sarah stood in the cemetery, holding a black umbrella just in case. Beside her was Chloe, looking smart in a new school uniform. They stood before a marble headstone. Arthur Sterling, 1950-2024. He finally found an honest transaction. Arthur had passed away peacefully 2 days after the board meeting. He had lived just long enough to see his son arrested and his company saved. "Did he really give you $1 billion, Mummy?" Chloe asked, looking at the grave. "No, sweetie," Sarah smiled. "He gave me something better. He gave me a job." Sarah wasn't the CEO. She had hired the grey-haired man, Mr. Henderson, to run the business. Sarah was the president of the Sterling Foundation. Her job was to give the money away. She spent her days funding schools, hospitals, and ensuring that no one in the city had to choose between rent and food, she reached into her purse. She pulled out a small frame. Inside was a crisp, flat $1 bill. The stamp on the back, 44-19-02, was still there. She placed the frame on the tombstone. "Keep the change, Arthur," she whispered. She took Chloe's hand. "Come on. I know a place that makes great pancakes, and I hear the new owner is very nice." "Who's the new owner?" Chloe asked as they walked toward the waiting car. Not a Rolls-Royce, but a sensible SUV. "Me," Sarah beamed. She had bought Miller's Diner. She renovated it, gave Beatrice her walking papers, and hired Old Man Miller back as the head chef with a salary that made him cry. It was the only place in Seattle where you could get a 5-star meal for $5. And if you couldn't pay, it was on the house. And that is the story of how a single dollar, given in insult, became the key to $1 billion empire. Sarah Bennett proved that integrity is expensive. It costs you everything in the short term, but pays out infinitely in the end. Richard Sterling is currently serving 3 consecutive life sentences. Sarah and Chloe never spent a cold night again. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of betrayal, mystery, and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next story about a janitor who accidentally discovers a time machine. What would you have done if you were Sarah? Would you have taken the $500,000 bribe? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.